Hi everybody, I'm Gwendolyn Stirk, and I'm privileged today to be with Mary Beth Walter again. Thanks so much.
You.
We're talking today about special needs children, and we're going to talk today about school options. And there are some school options that are out there.
There are.
And I think that it's important for people to understand and navigate. Before we get started into the options within the public school system, one question we frequently get is the distinction between just going to a private, maybe a parochial school versus a public school. I would like you to discuss the rights in the federal law. It really relates to public school, is that correct?
That is correct.
You know, I think that a lot of times people get that very confused because they think that they can just sign up for the local religious school or a private school and get the same accommodations, and it's simply not the case.
No. The school option, especially for special needs, is public schools by law are designed to have the support services necessary. Usually a religious school, it doesn't have that array of options. It doesn't have the psychologist, the social worker on staff, those type of personnel.
And the federal law that governs this and then is implemented, and sometimes on a varying degree on a state-by-state basis, does not apply to that private school.
That is correct.
Got it. So sometimes then people engage and they get an IEP for their child and they get it back, and there's a word in there and it says, well, my child should be in a non-blended classroom. What does that mean?
Non-blended is self-contained. So the student body is smaller in that classroom. So there are some guidelines. You
Okay.
can only have, I think it's, depending on the severity, anywhere from 9 to about 18 students within a classroom. There's usually a teacher present and a special education aide. Some students need that not only academically, but some children are just too overwhelmed a whole day with the amount of students and the change within the environment. So
Okay.
they need a self-contained classroom.
So now that self-contained classroom is a self-contained classroom which only accommodates special
That is correct.
education.
Non-blended is
Non-blended. Now, even then within that special education, there are those students who are so severe in terms of their needs that even non-blended special education class won't meet their needs, correct?
That is correct.
And then they need one-on-one time. So within that structure, there might be a student who's as a non-blended, first blended for special needs students. So there's non-blended and blended special needs versus regular classroom, correct?
Yes.
And then there's the next structure, which is a blended special needs program, and then almost an individualized. And maybe for a portion of the day, that child has so many requirements or needs, there needs to be one-on-one time.
Yes, and it's usually done within an IEP setting where you have, I can't remember the numbers, but if it's more than 50% of the day, which is in self-contained or non-blended special education classrooms, that's considered full-time special education services.
Okay.
Under 50%, I think it's 50 and then 25. So it depends on the level of services you receive from special education personnel and the amount of time you spend in non-blended classrooms.
Got it. And so it's real important to understand that term as a parent because you might find that the school that you're looking at may not accommodate those particular needs.
That is correct. But if it's a public school and if the IEP dictates that those needs need to be met, the school district must provide them.
Interesting. So that might mean, though, that the child's not going within that district. It may mean that they either have to bring in personnel or take the child out.
Yes, usually when it's a specialized school or non-blended classroom, or non-blended classroom is a classroom within the public setting. Usually if it's a specialized program, the easiest one that comes to mind is, let's say that it's for the child presents deafness.
Okay.
So the child has a diagnosis of being deaf. There aren't that many people within that school population where those needs could be met. For instance, that would be targeted then not only with the acquisition of academics, but also how to navigate the coping skills, lip reading, sign language, how to access a phone. There's all of those.
And that would have to be designed and specially created for that student.
That is correct.
And then aren't there some instances where the school can't accommodate the child at all and the school then has to then contract with another school?
That is correct. Usually the one I was just talking about, depending on the severity, that person might go to a specialized school. in terms of behavior, if the student truly can just not maintain and has become, usually the phrase is, a danger to self or others,
Okay.
because they need that emotional or behavioral support.
And then you might find that you're not within that school district setting at all.
That is
You're going
correct.
to a separate school, but then the funding is then directed through that separate school, meaning you're still going to you're not going to a private education where you have to now spend money. It's paid through the state.
It's paid through the state, and the school district must provide the transportation.
To and from. And this is part of the federal rights that are implemented in state law. Well, it's very interesting because I think that when you get that IEP or you get that 504, especially though with the IEP, you're reading through there. You have to go into the individualized plan to look at what kind of classroom settings are going to be there. And that's where a school advocate can become important. And I know that as your role as a school advocate, you would be able to explain what those options are and specifically address with the parent whether or not the school, that district that the child's going to, can actually accommodate the requirements, correct?
Yes, and also understand as a parent, you have a right to go visit that school, and so does the student. And I would encourage that, whether or not you use an advocate, but also go to the school that they're proposing.
Got it. Because I think sometimes that visual effect can help in terms of what the plan is in the future. Well, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
I think this is really important information to people that are going through this situation. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.